Hello and welcome to The Download from Wise Woman and Wordsmith, where insight meets inspiration. A space for creatives, dreamers and visionaries ready to spark new ideas, ignite purpose and reimagine possibilities. Here we share downloads of wisdom, stories and strategies to help you thrive in your creative journey. I'm your host, Jill Marshall. Tune in, connect and let the magic unfold.
Show you tomorrow.
So this episode is kind of significant. It's episode 52. 52 weeks or a whole calendar year of weekly podcasts. 1 year ago, this very week, the first week in 2025, I published the first episode of the Download podcast. Actually, the first few. And since then, I've shown up every week, bar one or two like Christmas, to reflect and write and record and disseminate a new episode. The new year is often a time to reflect on the past year, but it's also a complete year of doing the podcast. So it does seem to be the moment to look back and consider a few things. What's it taught me, for instance? Well, one thing it's definitely brought home to me is the power of shipping something before it's perfect. The joy of a creative playground. The complete satisfaction of being able to do something from beginning to end with just the information in my head and the tools I have to hand. And the understanding of how we need to make the main thing and not do it for the metrics. Well, what do I mean by that? Making the main thing is something I've passed on to the fiction editors I've been mentoring also for the last year. Generally, in an edit, there's one main thing that if the writer were to fix it or change it or improve it, it would shift the book on its axis and improve it more than the sum, possibly, of all the other smaller things they should address. In the report that editors send out to the writers, it's a good idea to flag up this main thing first. It might be overwhelming, but if they only complete one of your recommendations, it will be the one with the most bang for your, pardon the pun, book. Another example. I've recently stumbled across a rather beautiful YouTube channel called Rewilding Jude. Jude drops weekly videos on slowly doing up and growing his ramshackle barn plus bothy type building in Scotland. He's got hundreds of thousands of followers and has been nominated for Content Creator Awards. But the joy of it all is that it's all just icing on the cake for the viewer and a complete surprise to Jude himself. The main thing for us lucky viewers is watching him tumble into snowdrifts and trundle his little wheelbarrow from tumble-down outbuilding to tumble-down house, or gently and slowly transforming his lounge or making jam for his homemade loaf. He began this journey to rebuild his life after the death of his parents and to find some purpose to it all. And he goes about everything with such self-effacing humour and willingness to give something very difficult a go that it's a joy to behold. And behold it, people do, with a genuine love and support that seems rare on social media or anywhere these days. He seems to have been adopted many times over, which is not bad for a man in his mid-30s. For Jude himself, the metrics have followed and the channel is monetized, which is YouTube speak for now he makes his living as a YouTuber, not as a homesteader. But it's only because he stays right on track and keeps the main thing. There is something about not being performative. Word of the year for 2025, I feel. Just being yourself, genuine, actively engaged in things that are meaningful to you. And I am sensing it's about nothing other than living the life that you want to live, as Jude is doing. If that means a lesser job and an easier time, do it. If that means a smaller house and no car and a huge amount more freedom, do it. But if that means a bigger house and a second house and many cars, then do it. The feeling I have got from doing this podcast, and it's probably not even a podcast in the noticeable sense, I don't interview people or show myself in headphones behind a big microphone apart from the ones on my image, which was created in Canva. The feeling I've had, which is so very warm and satisfying, is of sharing from the heart, from the mind, from a form of wisdom that bubbles up from the things I've studied and experienced and been guided to learn, and from a massive need and urge to create. And occasionally, when people tell me I've made them laugh or even cry, or described something that illuminated an answer to a problem, I've experienced satisfaction bordering on joy. Something I've put out in the world has touched someone else's life. And that's what it's about, really. But it's also helped me shape what I think, because that's what writing does for me. And of course, before each recording becomes a podcast episode, it's a piece of writing. Those nebulous trails of wispy inspiration that have somehow become consolidated in the process, and that will lead to a map that I could produce soon that might help other people even more in their intuitive and creative journeys, and possibly their own individuation path. In fact, I've been so creatively fulfilled that I haven't felt the need to write a book in this last year, which is quite a rare thing in my life, certainly for the last 25 years. But also, of course, I have been writing every week and have haphazardly and effortlessly somehow produced over 100,000 words of something which may indeed be a book anyway, just not a novel. And that too has been expansive, a way to look at writing in new ways and new formats and embrace the newness of an old passion. It's also been wonderful to use my voice again and remember how much I enjoy it. I've always loved being an upfront speaker and trainer, but for many years and for many different reasons, my voice has been quite diminished, which will amaze my friends who think I do nothing but talk. Doing this podcast has helped me reclaim my voice, both in terms of personal writing style and in terms of speaking and engaging and dramatic delivery and all the things I've loved for a lifetime. I may even burst into song someday soon, though I've actually done that more over the last few months with pub choir. The other thing the podcast has done, which is a weird tangential corollary, is to provide for me a creative playground, not just in writing, but in a chance to play and explore and utilize technology. I'm no audio engineer, but I can now produce audio pieces with background mood music and interesting chimey interventions, and I actually have an understanding of what different recording techniques and equipment do for or against your delivery, to the extent that I realised I'd misrecorded my Christmas Eve audio, and therefore I didn't put it out. I've also used AI extensively to help draft episodes where the theme was eluding me, or I hadn't actually bothered to think of a new episode at all, to draft show notes and summaries and social posts, and to distribute the whole show. And of course to create images and videos and carousels and supporting visuals that were just not possible a couple of years ago, at least not for me, even though with my work in communications and in publishing, I've been in this space a long time. I've also been able to play with the brains of my fiction editing mentees as I made them spot the difference between author-generated, AI-generated, and something in between generated chapters, so that they can do the same for the writers they work with. I've even experimented with app and AI agent creation, and throughout it all, have learned with all of this that it's incredibly helpful and for me quite exciting, but AI is not infallible. And it helps to know a little more than your chatbot friend in certain areas so that you can sense check it. It even tells outright lies, like when I asked ChatGPT to find me a quote for my episode Let It Lie, from the comedian who I couldn't remember who'd made that line famous. It came back with the name Peter Kay, and the apparently famous scene with a family where they wouldn't let it lie, and a quote or two. I didn't know the famous sketch it was alluding to, but I was happily going down this track, which sounded very feasible, when I suddenly heard in my mind the distinctive Newcastle-ish accent of the very comedian I'd been thinking about, saying, "You wouldn't let it lie." Not northwestern UK, as in Peter Kay, but northeastern UK, as in Vic Reeves. I went back to Chatty and said, "It's Vic Reeves, not Peter Kay." "Oh yes," it said, "you're quite right." "So why did you say Peter Kay?" I said, a little belligerently. Because it sounded like something a northern comedian would say, and he seemed a good fit. Well, that was the gist. But the quotes and the famous family scene, which in my head played out like an episode of the Royal Family. "Ah yes, I don't really know where they came from," said Chatty. "So you made them up?" "Yes," it confessed. And that image of me on my podcast with the big Rode microphone in my recording studio, Also a lie, created, as I mentioned, in Canva. I've actually recorded most episodes, including this one, on a voice recorder app installed on a cracked old Android phone that I now struggle to hold as it deposits splinters of screen glass into my fingers. Or on a cheap stand-up mic that looks like a 1970s pointy antenna and picks up just about as much noise as an aerial from everywhere but my mouth. I've even recorded directly into my laptop, which are the moments when it sounds especially echoey. My studio has occasionally been a toilet, as in a cloakroom, not the toilet itself, but mostly it's been the top drawer of a tall boy in my bedroom, pulled out so that I can balance a tray across it, with said terrible microphone and my laptop forming a mock standing desk so I can be standing upright while I flail my arms around and get excited. The AI image is what I wish it was like, and what I hope it sounds like, but I'm okay if it's a bit hit and miss sometimes. That's life. And that's what you get for just showing up and doing the work with whatever you have to hand. And that's the thing with AI and all the other smoke and mirrors around podcasts and YouTube and so on. Take it all with a large grain of salt and keep yourself relevant in the mix. Stay one step ahead if you can. Which brings me back to the Download podcast. One step ahead. That's all it was in the beginning. I was producing someone else's podcast, the rather excellent niche property learnings of That Retail Property Guy, also available on all your favourite platforms. And while I was 90% confident about the content creation and the tech side of it, and 100% confident about the storytelling and editing and the interesting topics in this very specific area of estates and financial management, I wanted to test it first. So I did just that. I put out an episode of my own, one step ahead of the other podcast, which, yes, has now been going for almost a year too. I knew what I'd talk about, but I've also let it evolve throughout the year. I've talked about intuition and insights from other places and angelic visits and miracles. I've talked about creativity and writing and publishing and some of the people who've inspired me in these areas and some of the crossing points between these areas and the intuitive ones. I've talked about Carl Jung and individuation processes, archetypes and dreamscapes, ancestral wounds and imprints. I've talked about women's careers and the suppression of their voices, and I've devoted several episodes to some of the wonderful women I count among my friends. And I've talked about loss and rising again and love. I've even narrated a couple of audiobooks, and more on this soon. Basically, very selfishly, I've talked about what interests me and have somehow produced a year's worth of content that seems, occasionally, to interest other people too. Just by starting out one step ahead, just by going for it week after week, even when nobody else was requiring it of me and it's not bringing me any obvious reward or recompense, and when I'm sure there are plenty of people wondering why I'm bothering. The short answer is, it makes me happy. I enjoy it. I get to play. I get to think about what I think. I get to share those thoughts about what I think and how I think. I get to connect, and sometimes even I get to help. It makes me happy because I was inspired to do it by my intuition, to which you'll know I listen a great deal, and by the shifting of the universe around me. And sometimes it shifts a little pattern in the universe somewhere else around someone else. Yep, that makes me happy. And the other answer to why I bother downloading the download? Well, to name the Richard Curtis film, it's about time. And as in the film, I've also learned something else about time. I've spent a whole year doing this podcast, and in the same year, on my last birthday, I turned a very significant number. It's the kind of number which should tell me I'm officially old, I guess, although I don't feel it, and I'm pretty sure I don't act it. A year is a definitive chunk of time, chronological time, regular time, as is your age. I've counted in weeks and hours to write and minutes to record. But sometimes time isn't linear. It spirals and it reconnects. You only have to listen to what happened with my dear friend Jane in that episode to see how true this is. Time collapses in on itself. feeds itself through a cosmic wormhole, collects some old items and some trippy objects from the future along the way, and it delivers them all into a current moment. It stretches and speeds up. It's not the constant we think it is. Sometimes time is not Chronos. Sometimes it's Kairos. Kairos is described as a propitious moment for decision or action. In archery, Kairos is the moment where the arrow may be shot with sufficient force to penetrate a target. In weaving, Kairos is the moment when the shuttle can be passed through threads on the loom. It's the exact moment when everything lines up in order for something to get to where it's meant to go. I think the Download podcast is Kairos. It may have been a standard year of 52 weeks, but for me it's been that swirling constellation of starry moments and deep intuitive hits and a sense of guidance that comes from somewhere beyond or perhaps deep within us. It's been a moment for decision or action when forces join together to splice an arrow through linear time into the target of self-expression and expansion and growth. So now, as that linear year comes to an end, that's a wrap on the Download Season 1. It's been an absolute blast and I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have. And it will be back, but probably not in the same form. I'm actually hoping for that Rode microphone studio setup and wonderful production values, and the YouTubed interviews with other creatives, and the recording of my own audio versions of my own books. My feeling is that this is where it's headed, but I may discover that it's something different, or not anything at all. I'll let you know. Meanwhile, just one step ahead in the mysterious world of creativity, intuition, and individuation is where I'll be. Hopefully, I'll see you there. Thanks for tuning in to the Download podcast. Feel free to like, comment, and share, and all of that good stuff. And for more about my books, including opportunities to collaborate, please check out marshallbooks.com. Also, I'd love to hear more about your own intuitive hits and downloads, so do find me on Facebook, YouTube, and more.